All right, so now we are on Genesis 14, where Abraham rescues Lot. Let us begin.
Genesis 14. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the salt sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zazims in Ham, and the Emims in Shaveh Kerathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites, that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people.
All right. We're going to go to Jasher for this same story now. So, summarizing, there was a huge war. Sodom and Gomorrah got involved, and Lot was a byproduct of the war. So stopping at verse 16, we're going to go to chapter 16 of the book of Jasher now. One second. Get this audio reader up and going. Did it freeze on me? I think it did.
Jasher chapter 16.
There we go.
At that time, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, sent to all the neighboring kings, to Nimrod, king of Shinar, who was then under his power, and to Tidal, king of Goyim, and to Arioch, king of Elasar, with whom he made a covenant, saying, Come up to me, and assist me, that we may smite all the towns of Sodom and its inhabitants, for they have rebelled against me these 13 years. And these 4 kings went up with all their camps, about 800,000 men. And they went as they were, and smote every man they found in their road. And the 5 kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, Shinar king of Admah, Shemeber king of Zeboim, Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, and Bela, king of Zoar, went out to meet them, and they all joined together in the valley of Siddim. And these 9 kings made war in the valley of Siddim. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were smitten before the kings of Elam. And the valley of Siddim was full of lime pits. And the kings of Elam pursued the kings of Sodom. And the kings of Sodom with their camps fled and fell into the lime pits. And all that remained went to the mountain for safety. And the 5 kings of Elam came after them and pursued them to the gates of Sodom, and they took all there was in Sodom. And they plundered all the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, and his property. And they seized all the goods of the cities of Sodom, and they went away. And Eunuch, Abram's servant who was in the battle, saw this, and told Abram all that the kings had done to the cities of Sodom, and that Lot was taken captive by them. And Abram heard this, and he rose up with about 318 men that were with him, and he that night pursued these kings and smote them. And they all fell before Abram and his men, and there was none remaining but the 4 kings who fled, and they went each his own road. And Abram recovered all the property of Sodom, and he also recovered Lot, and his property, his wives and little ones, and all belonging to him, so that Lot lacked nothing. And when he returned from smiting these kings, he and his men passed the valley of Siddim, where the kings had made war together. And Bera, king of Sodom, and the rest of his men that were with him, went out from the lime pits into which they had fallen to meet Abram and his men.
All right. Get just a little bit different or more detail, different perspective or more detail than what we read in Genesis. So that's why we're reading line by line all that is what's going on with Abraham's life. And as Aki Bruce said in the chat, if you didn't catch it, let's go all the way back up here. Verse 1, it came to pass in the days of Raphael, king of Shinar. You go to the beginning of Jasher 14. Who's king of Shinar? Amraphel is Nimrod. Okay. You see that with quite a few notable characters in scripture, especially from different books. Sometimes they have different names. See that with Hagar. Quite a few people, actually. So that's just one to note. That is Nimrod. All right. So now Abraham wins the battle and rescues his nephew. And let's continue in verse 17 in Genesis 14, where we get the Melchizedek.
And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread, even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldst say, I have made Abram rich. Save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion.
All right, so now we're going to read it in Jasher in a pretty significant detail on who is the Melchizedek king of Salem. Now we're going to read Jasher chapter 16, starting at verse 11.
And Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem.
And once again, slightly different title. We got Melchizedek in Genesis. In the book of Jasher, we see Adonizedek. King, Lord, same, pretty much same position, just different title, wording of it.
The same was Shem.
Shem
went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech. And Adonizedek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him a tenth from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies. For Adonizedek was a priest before God. And all the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah who were there with their servants approached Abram and begged him to return them their servants whom he had made captive, and to take unto himself all the property. And Abram answered the kings of Sodom, saying, As the Lord liveth, who created heaven and earth, and redeemed my soul from all affliction, and who delivered me this day from my enemies and gave them into my hand, I will not take anything belonging to you, that you may not boast tomorrow, saying, Abram became rich from our property that he saved. For the Lord my God, in whom I trust, said unto me, Thou shalt lack nothing, for I will bless thee in all the works of thy hands. And now, therefore, behold, here is all belonging to you. Take it and go. As the Lord liveth, I will not take from you a living soul down to a shoe tie or thread, excepting the expense of the food of those who went out with me to battle, as also the portions of the men who went with me, Anah, Ashcol, and Mamre, they and their men, as well as those who had remained to watch the baggage. They shall take their portion of the spoil. And the kings of Sodom gave Abram according to all that he had said, and they pressed him to take of whatever he chose, but he would not. And he sent away the kings of Sodom and the remainder of their men, and he gave them orders about Lot, and they went to their respective places. And Lot, his brother's son, he also sent away with his property, and he went with them. And Lot returned to his home to Sodom, and Abram and his people returned to their home to the plains of Mamre, which is in Hebron. At that time.
All right. And now we're still online. That was the completion of Genesis 14, but I wanted to add the precept for this chapter mentioned in Hebrews 7. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High Elohim, which we now know is Shem. And we see that obviously Abraham already met Shem, right? But obviously this was a different setting. He didn't come as Shem. He came as Melchizedek, priest of the Most High, which is why Abraham gave tithe to him, because this was a ritual of Abraham being anointed by the Most High in this moment. Who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and baruched him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, this is what Melchizedek, king of Salem, that's what it's saying, king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace. And that is Genesis 14. All right, Genesis 15.
Genesis 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came.
Oh, 1 second. I wanted to give reference, since it was just a very small, portion of bringing up the Melchizedek, that I wanted to just give a reference that I do have a study that's much more thorough on Melchizedek, king of righteousness, on my YouTube. So if you want to check it out, get more understanding there, you can. And also, this is just breaking down that meaning. Melech means king. Zedek means righteousness, king of righteousness. Or if we were also talking about Adon-Zedek, Adon means Lord, so Lord of righteousness. But like I said, it's pretty much the same difference there. And so yeah, much more of this, the meaning and the entire purpose of the Melchizedek priest is pretty significant because that is the priesthood that we are in now under Mashiach's priesthood is the Melchizedek. So pretty significant importance, especially for our time. All right, Genesis 15. Just started. After these things, the word of the Most High came unto
Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield, and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless? And the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad, and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it.
All right, we're going to do a quick pause there just so we can be in unison with the book of Jasher. This is how it's going to be here on out. I want to try to stay on topic as we're going down each book here. So Genesis, that was Genesis 15, 1 through 7. Now we're going to read still in Jasher 16. And this is just a quick 2 verses here. Verse 20 and 21. Yeah, I'll let the audio read. Just keep going.
The Lord again appeared to Abram in Hebron, and he said to him, Do not fear. Thy reward is very great before me. For I will not leave thee until I shall have multiplied thee, and blessed thee, and made thy seed like the stars in heaven, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And I will give unto thy seed all these lands that thou seest with thine eyes. To them will I give them for an inheritance forever. Only be strong, and do not fear. Walk before me, and be perfect. And in the 78th year of the life of Abram, in that year died Reu, the son of Peleg. And all the days of Reu were 239 years, and he died.
All right. So now let's continue. But that is all we're going to, let me see, 1 second. We're going to take a move to Genesis 16 because this goes on topic of rituals and stuff like that, and it talks about other nations, and we're sticking this completely on the story of Abram. So we're going to continue and go to Genesis 16 now and continue there. Chapter 16, verse 1.
Genesis 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. And she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself unto her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou God seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Beer Lohai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old, when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram.
All right. Once again, let's carry over this story to the book of Jasher, chapter 16, verse 23. Get a good little bit more details per usual in the book of Jasher. Let us read.
And Sarai, the daughter of Haran, Abram's wife, was still barren in those days. She did not bear to Abram either son or daughter. When she saw that she bare no children, she took her handmaid Hagar, whom Pharaoh had given her, and she gave her to Abram, her husband, for a wife.
So I stated this earlier in the reading, that it didn't say at the time, but as we're reading right now, Hagar was the daughter of Pharaoh. So Eleazar and Hagar were both gifted. Eleazar was gifted from Nimrod, and Hagar was gifted from Pharaoh. Things that, you wouldn't know unless you read the book of Jasher. All right, verse 25.
For Hagar learned all the ways of Sarai, as Sarai taught her. She was not in any way deficient in following her good ways. And Sarai said to Abram, Behold, here is my handmaid Hagar. Go to her, that she may bring forth upon my knees, that I may also obtain children through her. At the end of 10 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 85th year of Abram's life, Sarai gave Hagar unto him. And Abram hearkened to the voice of his wife Sarai. And he took his handmaid Hagar, and Abram came to her, and she conceived. And when Hagar saw that she had conceived, she rejoiced greatly. and her mistress was despised in her eyes. And she said within herself, "This can only be that I am better before God than Sarai my mistress. For all the days that my mistress has been with my Lord, she did not conceive. But me, the Lord has caused in so short a time to conceive by him."
So we do see the confirmation of what Sarah was speaking of in Genesis 16. Let me see. Yes, in verse 5, I was despised in her eyes. We're reading in Jasher that, yes, Hagar is looking at Sarah differently now. She is looking down on Sarah, and she's looking at her as if she's better than Sarah. So this is really happening. It's not just Sarah tripping. Hagar is looking at her differently. Continuing.
And when Sarai saw that Hagar had conceived by Abram, Sarai was jealous of her handmaid. And Sarai said within herself, "This is surely nothing else but that she must be better than I am." And Sarai said unto Abram, "My wrong be upon me. For at the time when thou didst pray before the Lord for children, why didst thou not pray on my account, that the Lord should give me seed from thee? And when I speak to Hagar in thy presence, she despiseth my words, because she has conceived, and thou wilt say nothing to her. May the Lord judge between me and thee for what thou hast done to me." And Abram said to Sarai, "Behold, thy handmaid is in thy hand. Do unto her as it may seem good in thy eyes." And Sarai afflicted her, and Hagar fled from her to the wilderness. An angel of the Lord found her in the place where she had fled by a well, and he said to her, "Do not fear, for I will multiply thy seed, for thou shalt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishmael. Now then, return to Sarai thy mistress, and submit thyself unto her hands." And Hagar called the place of that well Beer-lahai-roi. It is between Kadesh and the wilderness of Bered. And Hagar at that time returned to her master's house. And at the end of days, Hagar bare a son to Abram. And Abram called his name Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when he begat him.
All right. Let's continue to Genesis 17. Starting at verse 1.
Genesis 17. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face. And God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee.
All right, so just quick touching the name one last time. His name goes from Abram, Father Most High, to Father of a great multitude. And we also, let's see, yes, down here from High Father to Father of a multitude. Continuing.
And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generations, he that is born in the house, or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money, must needs be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh, for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant.
Do we see a correlation? The promise of the seed of Abraham, what came first? Before he was able to give seed to produce Isaac, which is the promised seed, not Ishmael. The covenant of circumcision was established. By no coincidence, Isaac was the first male born in the covenant that was circumcised on the 8th day. By no coincidence. Circumcision is a representation of taking off the flesh. And that it is taking off the flesh of your foreskin on your productive unit of a man. And which is directly correlated to his seed. So you taking off the foreskin before producing a seed is exactly saying that you will take off your flesh and put on the spirit for you and your seed eternally until the flesh is completely removed. And that's the thing too, like in the last verse we read, the uncircumcised man-child whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Ironically enough, circumcision is to literally cut off your foreskin. You only can serve one master. You cutting off your foreskin is taking off the flesh to be redeemed by the spirit. That's why if you don't take off the flesh, you can't be redeemed by the spirit. All of this is very symbolic spiritually. And it's like, once again, it's not a coincidence, the order and the timing of things. And if you're not circumcised today, I recommend getting circumcised. I don't see how we can say that it's done away with. And if you don't get circumcised, I don't know what to tell you. You pray and ask Abba for direction with that. But we know that we shouldn't assume commandments are done away with anymore, right? The idea of sacrifices being done away with has been prophesied all throughout the Old Testament, and the prophecy of someone coming to lay the sacrifice for us all has been prophesied. There's no prophecy that says man will no longer have to be circumcised. Remember in Acts 15, after Messiah, the Jews were still being circumcised. The Gentiles that were new to the covenant was the ones being told that, hey, you don't have to be circumcised right now. Grow into it. when you're ready, the time will come. But Jews, people that are in the covenant, that are keeping the law, we're still getting circumcised. And if you're grafted into the covenant, what we just read, you shall be circumcised. All right, continuing, verse 15.
And God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abram fell upon his face, and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? And Abraham said unto God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house, born in the house, and bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him.
Very big deal. To think that circumcision isn't a big deal anymore. How? I mean, how? And let's finish the idea that I was elaborating on about the taking off the foreskin of your flesh, circumcision, representation of taking off the flesh and putting on the spirit. The fact that the covenant that Abraham had to circumcise himself before producing the promised seed, because the promised seed is Messiah. You have the Israelites, but all of the prophecies are fulfilled through one man, which is Messiah. And circumcision is directly linked to the works of Messiah. What did Messiah do on the stake, on the cross? What did he do? He took off the flesh. He died to it to be born again in the spirit. All of these things, so unified in connection. That's why Abraham couldn't produce the promised seed before being circumcised. It is the signs of the prophetic times for when Messiah would be here. And let's go to some precepts now. Go to Deuteronomy 29, verse 9 through 15. Keep therefore the words of this covenant and do them, that ye may prosper in all that ye do. Ye stand this day, all of you, before Hayah your Elohim, your captains of your tribes, your elders and your officers, with all the men of Yasharallah, your little ones, your wives, and thy stranger that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood unto the drawer of thy water, that thou shouldest enter into the covenant with Hayah the Elohim, into his oath, which Hayah the Elohim maketh with thee this day, that he may establish thee today for a people unto himself, and that he may be unto thee a Elohim, as he has said unto thee, and as he has sworn unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Neither will you only do with you only do I make this covenant and this oath, but with him that standeth here with us this day before Haya our Elohim, and also with him that is not with us this day. So once again, this covenant is for everyone, right? And this covenant is marked by circumcision. Neither with you only do I make this covenant and this oath, but with him that standeth here with us this day before the Most High, and also with him that is not here with us this day. If you have taken the covenant, the oath, verse 15 is talking about you, because you weren't there at that time, but verse 15 says you are just as good as being there in that time that he made the promise with Abraham and now with Moses and the whole congregation of Yasharallah. So remember that. Remember that. The covenant that he made with Moses in the wilderness, what he made with Abraham, is renewed in each and every one of us. So let's make sure we're keeping the covenant to its full capacity and study to show thyself approved, to ensure that we are doing what we're supposed to do. And let's make sure, understand this too. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why does it say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Because Abraham had another firstborn, Ishmael, right? But it's with Isaac, the promised seed. Jacob is not the oldest seed. Esau is. Take a hold of the promise of those of the righteous seed. Right here, right now, take it in and make sure we're practicing righteousness and not just assuming things that, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. Oh, that doesn't apply to me. Says who, says where? Acts 7:8. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision, and so Abraham begat Isaac and circumcised him the 8th day. First person in the covenant be circumcised on the 8th day is Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12 patriarchs. And then Isaiah 51:2. Look unto Abraham your father and unto Sarah that bare you, for I called him alone and blessed him and increased him, as we are witnessing right here in Genesis 17. All right, so now let's go to Jasher. We're going to read Jasher chapter 17, verse 16 through 20. And Abram, the son of Terah, was then 99 years old. At that time, the Adon appeared to him, and he said to him, I will make my covenant between me and thee, and I will greatly multiply thy seed. And this is the covenant which I make between me and thee, that every male child be circumcised, thou and thy seed after thee. At 8 days old shall it be circumcised. And this covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And now, therefore, thy name shall no more be called Abram, but Abraham, and thy wife shall no more be called Sarai, but Sarah. For I will bless you both, and I will multiply your seed after you, that you shall become a great nation, and kings shall come forth from you. And then I'm just going to read the first 2 verses, kind of just goes better with it instead of waiting. First 2 verses of chapter 18. And Abraham rose and did all that Elohim had ordered him, And he took the men of his household and brought those, and those bought with his money, and he circumcised them as the Adon had commanded him. And there was not one left whom he did not circumcise. And Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised in the flesh of their foreskin. 13 years old was Ishmael when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. All right. Now continuing to Genesis chapter 18. All right, Genesis 18, verse 1.
Genesis 18. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes, and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Then I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do, as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd, and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hasted to dress it. And he took butter and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I have waxed old shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh.
He let her know, like, I see you. All right, let's go to the book of Jasher now. Let me see here. Chapter 18, going to read verses 3 through 10. And in the 3rd day, Abraham went out of his tent and sat at the door to enjoy the heat of the sun during the pain of his flesh. Because remember, he just circumcised. So this is immediately after circumcision. That's why it says during the pain of his flesh. And the Adon appeared to him in the plain of Mamre, and sent 3 of his ministering angels to visit him. Okay, here's some details that's not in the canon here. We see, let's see, right here, verse 2. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. It doesn't specify that they are angels, but these 3 men are angels, which is why Abraham kind of freaks out and starts, pleading to them to allow him to give them feast and for them to abode there. because they're angels. And he was sitting at the door of the tent. And he lifted his eyes and saw, and lo, 3 men were coming from a distance. And he rose up and ran to meet them. And he bowed down to them and brought them into his house. And he said to them, if now I have found favor in your sight, turn in and eat a morsel of bread. And he pressed them, and they turned in and gave them water, and they washed their feet. And he placed them under a tree at the door of the tent. And Abraham ran and took a calf, tender and good, and he hastened to kill it and gave it to his servant Eleazar to dress. And just another fun fact, it says that it gave it to a man to dress it. Where is it at? Somewhere in here. And that man is Eleazar. Yeah, here it is in verse 7. Abraham ran to the herd and gave it unto a young man. That young man was Eleazar. Just give a little details that we don't see. And Abraham came to Sarah into the tent, and he said to her, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes to cover the pot containing the meat. And she did so. And Abraham hastened and brought before them butter and milk, beef and mutton, and gave it before them to eat before the flesh of the calf was sufficiently done, and they did eat. And when they had done eating, one of them said to him, I will return to thee according to the time of life, and Sarah, thy wife, shall have a son. And the men afterwards departed and went their ways to the place which they were sent. And we're going to see that this is going to be connected with Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the very next line, which we're going to hop back into Genesis chapter 18 now. Verse 16, and complete the chapter at 33.
And the men rose up from thence, and looked toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now, and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence, and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy, and not spare the place, for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure, there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. And he spake unto him yet again, and said, peradventure, there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure, there shall 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it, if I find 30 there. And he said, Behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Peradventure there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord went his way, as soon as he had left communing with Abraham. And Abraham returned unto his place.
All right. Foreshadowing of the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah. Jasher 18. And this is also a testimony here. The Most High is, and he keeps going down, right? The Most High is making a point here, is that he's not going to destroy his people. He's like, yeah, there's not 50, Abraham. There's not 40. There's not 30. There's not 20. There's not 10. There's not 5. And for the mercy of Abraham, Lot is delivered. And there is nothing good that comes from Lot. But the Most High, we knows he will come for his one, even if there was one there. That is what we should gather from that, is that the Most High, let's say in our time, if the Most High levels out an entire city for whatever cause, natural disaster, war, simply put, they had it coming. They were not of Abba's. Abba delivers his people. He doesn't destroy them. Let's move this to Jasher. So chapter 18. Now I'm going to read verse 11 through 15 now. In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and of the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Adon, and they provoked the Adon with their abominations, and they strengthened in aging abominably and scornfully before the Adon, and their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Most High. And they had in their land a very expensive valley, about half a day's walk. And in it there were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times a year with their wives and children and all belonging to them. And they rejoiced there with timbrels and dances. And in the time of rejoicing, they would all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, adultery, and some the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and daughter in the hands of his neighbor, and did not say a word. So verse 14, we see adultery, and then we see exactly what Torah tells us not to do with your daughters. Do not give them over to be harlots, because they're not marrying their virgin daughters. They're just fornicating with them. So adultery, harlotry, fornication. And they did so from morning to night, and they afterwards returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times a year. And I recommend to read all of Jasher, but the rest of this chapter and a lot of chapter 19 is just going over the stories of the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah, of why the city had to go to dust. And I'm not where that is the, let me see. And we're skipping chapter 19 because this is the story of Abraham, not all these other stories. I'm not going to go any more into detail of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you haven't read it, it's a story that you should know it. Genesis chapter 19. And like I said, Jasher 18 and 19 are all connected to that time frame. Go recommend you to go read it on your own, but this is the story of Abraham. So we're going to skip any more details on Sodom and Gomorrah. Now we're in Genesis chapter 20.
Genesis 20. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, She is my sister? And she, even she herself, said, He is my brother? In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart. For I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning, and called all his servants, and told all these things in their ears. And the men were sore afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham, and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou, that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife.
So we referenced this in what was it? Genesis chapter 12, when he did the same thing with Pharaoh. And we already established all of this. Just give you that connection that the same story was in Genesis 12. And we also see this later on with Isaac. Isaac does the same thing. But let's carry on, finish this chapter, verse 13.
And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen, and men servants, and women servants, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee. Dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes, unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech, because of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
All right, we find that same story in Jasher chapter 20. All right. Get the audio reader going here.
Gera.
All right, yeah, we're in verse 1. At that time, Abraham journeyed from the plains of Mamre, and he went into the land of the Philistines, and he dwelt in Gerar.
It was in the 25th year of Abraham's being in the land of Canaan, and the 100th year of the life of Abraham, that he came to Gerar in the land of the Philistines. And when they entered the land, he said to Sarah his wife, "Say thou art my sister to anyone that shall ask thee, in order that we may escape the evil of the inhabitants of the land." And as Abraham was dwelling in the land of the Philistines, the servants of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, saw that Sarah was exceedingly beautiful. And they asked Abraham concerning her, and he said, "She is my sister."
Can we just get a moment of silence just to recognize how beautiful Sarah had to be? Why was everybody trying to get Sarah though? I mean, this is when you really think about it. Every land that they went to, like Abraham, I guess, had a legitimate concern of dealing with Sarah because she really was a woman that beauty was so outstanding that it had to surpass so many other women's beauty because everybody, you're trying to tell me there wasn't other women in Abraham's congregation of people? But everybody wanted Sarah. I mean, I guess he had a reason to be so paranoid. Right. It's like the two people that stand out the most that the scriptures make it so clear that they were just gorgeous would be Sarah and Joseph. Especially when you read the book of Jasher with, the added in understanding here. It's just funny, interesting, all at the same time. All right, verse 4.
And the servants of Abimelech went to Abimelech, saying, "A man from the land of Canaan is come to dwell in the land, and he has a sister that is exceeding fair." And Abimelech heard the words of his servants who praised Sarah to him. And Abimelech sent his officers, and they brought Sarah to the king. And Sarah came to the house of Abimelech, and the king saw that Sarah was beautiful, and she pleased him exceedingly. And he approached her and said to her, "What is that man to thee with whom thou didst come to our land?" And Sarah answered and said, "He is my brother, and we came from the land of Canaan to dwell wherever we could find a place." And Abimelech said to Sarah, "Behold, my land is before thee. Place thy brother in any part of this land that pleases thee, and it will be our duty to exalt and elevate him above all the people of the land, since he is thy brother." And Abimelech sent for Abraham. And Abraham came to Abimelech. And Abimelech said to Abraham, "Behold, I have given orders that thou shalt be honored as thou desirest on account of thy sister Sarah." And Abraham went forth from the king, and the king's present followed him. And at evening time, before men lie down to rest, the king was sitting upon his throne, and a deep sleep fell upon him. And he lay upon the throne and slept till morning. And he dreamed that an angel of the Lord came to him with a drawn sword in his hand. And the angel stood over Abimelech and wished to slay him with the sword. And the king was terrified in his dream and said to the angel, "In what have I sinned against thee, that thou comest to slay me with thy sword?" And the angel answered and said to Abimelech, "Behold, thou diest on account of the woman which thou didst yesternight bring to thy house. For she is a married woman, the wife of Abraham, who came to thy house. Now therefore, return that man to his wife, for she is his wife. And shouldst thou not return her, know that thou shalt surely die, thou and all belonging to thee. And on that night there was a great outcry in the land of the Philistines. And the inhabitants of the land saw the figure of a man standing with a drawn sword in his hand. And he smote the inhabitants of the land with the sword. Yea, he continued to smite them. And the angel of the Lord smote the whole land of the Philistines on that night. And there was a great confusion on that night and on the following morning. And every womb was closed, and all their issues, and the hand of the Lord was upon them, on account of Sarah, wife of Abraham, whom Abimelech had taken. And in the morning Abimelech rose with terror and confusion, and with a great dread. And he sent, and he had his servants called in, and he related his dream to them, and the people were greatly afraid. And one man standing amongst the servants of the king answered the king, saying, O sovereign king, restore this woman to her husband, for he is her husband. For the like happened to the king of Egypt when this man came to Egypt. And he said concerning his wife, She's my sister, for such is his manner of doing when he cometh to dwell in the land in which he is a stranger.
So we see the fame of this story is starting to spread according to the book of Jasher as well.
And Pharaoh sent and took this woman for a wife. And the Lord brought upon him grievous plagues until he returned the woman to her husband. Now therefore, O sovereign king, know what happened yesternight to the whole land. For there was a very great consternation and great pain and lamentation, and we know that it was on account of the woman which thou didst take. Now therefore, restore this woman to her husband, lest it should befall us as it did to Pharaoh king of Egypt and his subjects, and that we may not die. And Abimelech hastened and called, and had Sarah called for, and she came before him. And he had Abraham called for, and he came before him. And Abimelech said to them, What is this work you be doing in saying that you are brother and sister? And I took this woman for a wife? And Abraham said, Because I thought I should suffer death on account of my wife. And Abimelech took flocks and herds, and men servants and maid servants, and 1,000 pieces of silver. And he gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah to him. And Abimelech said to Abraham, Behold, the whole land is before thee. Dwell in it wherever thou shalt choose. And Abraham and Sarah his wife went forth from the king's presence with honor and respect. And they dwelt in the land, even in Gerar. And all the inhabitants of the land of the Philistines and the king's servants were still in pain through the plague which the angel had inflicted upon them the whole night on account of Sarah. And Abimelech sent for Abraham, saying, Pray now for thy servants to the Lord thy God, that he may put away this mortality from amongst us. And Abraham prayed on account of Abimelech and his subjects. And the Lord heard the prayer of Abraham, and he healed Abimelech and all his subjects.
Chapter 20 of Jasher. All right, let's continue with the story in Genesis 21. Finally, the birth of Isaac. We already mentioned quite a few things when we were talking about circumcision with Isaac, but now he's here. We're going to start off reading just verses 1 through 8.
Genesis 21. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived, and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, Who would have said unto Abraham, that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew, and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned.
We see that right here at verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned. So weaned off of his mother's milk. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. That was a thing. I mean, I don't know, if you want to practice that now, but that was a Hebrew cultural practice that when a child is weaned, a great feast is to be made. I feel like that's a separation of the milk and meat understanding there. But let's go to the book of Jasher now. Chapter 21, verses 1 through 8.
Jasher chapter 21. And it was at that time, at the end of a year and 4 months of Abraham's dwelling in the land of the Philistines in Gerar, that God visited Sarah. And the Lord remembered her, and she conceived, and bare a son to Abraham. And Abraham called the name of the son which was born to him, which Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac at 8 days old, as God had commanded Abraham to do unto his seed after him. And Abraham was 100, and Sarah 90 years old, when Isaac was born to them. And the child grew up, and he was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast upon the day that Isaac was weaned. And Shem and Eber and all the great people of the land, and Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and his servants, and Phicol, the captain of his host, came to eat and drink and rejoice at the feast which Abraham made upon the day of his son Isaac's being weaned.
How cool is that? This was not some small feast. Very prominent feast when your child is weaned.
And Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, his brother, came from Haran, they and all belonging to them. For they greatly rejoiced on hearing that a son had been born to Sarah. And they came to Abraham, and they ate and drank at the feast which Abraham made upon the day of Isaac's being weaned. And Terah and Nahor rejoiced with Abraham, and they remained with him many days in the land of the Philistines.
So, that's a pretty cool idea, Another reason to feast. Scripturally, we have, from being separate from the world, we don't want to do the traditional birthday parties. We don't want to do holidays, but things that are scriptural, obviously we have the feast days, we have the memorials, we have, I would even say, a type of version of a baby shower is scriptural. I mean, that's what happened with the wise men coming to Messiah, right? To give gifts when a baby is born. And here's another one, that scriptural feast that you can do is when I don't know if it's just a male, but when a child is weaned, have a feast, rejoice. All right. Now back to Genesis chapter 21, continuing at verse 9.
And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. and the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs, and she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bowshot, for she said, Let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him, and lifted up her voice, and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew, and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt.
All right, we're going to have a stop there to reference back to Jasher 21. And we're going to see, according to the book of Jasher, Sarah has a good purpose of wanting to remove Hagar and their son Ishmael at this time. So let's read that in the book of Jasher. Continuing, see here. Is that 21?
At that time, Sirach, the son of Reu, died in the first year of the birth of Isaac, son of Abraham. And all the days of Sirach were 239 years, and he died. And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, was grown up in those days. He was 14 years old when Sarah bare Isaac to Abraham. And God was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and he grew up, and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. And Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite him. And he took the bow and drew it and put the arrow in it and intended to slay Isaac.
So right there, we see that as a youngster, Ishmael wasn't probably the best big brother for Isaac. So we already see that the separation kind of needed to happen.
And Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son Isaac, and it grieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham and said to him, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be heir with my son. For thus did he seek to do unto him this day. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah. And he rose up early in the morning, and he took 12 loaves and a bottle of water, which he gave to Hagar, and sent her away with her son. And Hagar went with her son to the wilderness, and they dwelt in the wilderness of Paran with the inhabitants of the wilderness. And Ishmael was an archer, and he dwelt in the wilderness a long time. And he and his mother afterward went to the land of Egypt, and they dwelt there. And Hagar took a wife for her son from Egypt, and her name was Meribah. And the wife of Ishmael conceived, and bare 4 sons and 2 daughters. And Ishmael and his mother and his wife and children afterward went and returned to the wilderness. And they made themselves tents in the wilderness in which they dwelt. And they continued to travel and then to rest monthly and yearly. And God gave Ishmael flocks and herds and tents on account of Abraham his father. And the man increased in cattle. And Ishmael dwelt in deserts and in tents, traveling and resting for a long time. And he did not see the face of his father. And in some time after, Abraham said to Sarah his wife, I will go and see my son Ishmael, for I have a desire to see him, for for I have not seen him for a long time. And Abraham rode upon one of his camels to the wilderness to seek his son Ishmael, for he heard that he was dwelling in a tent in the wilderness with all belonging to him. And Abraham went to the wilderness, and he reached the tent of Ishmael about noon. And he asked after Ishmael, and he found the wife of Ishmael sitting in the tent with her children. And Ishmael, her husband, and his mother were not with them. And Abraham asked the wife of Ishmael, saying, Where has Ishmael gone? And she said, He's gone to the field to hunt. And Abraham was still mounted upon the camel, for he would not get off to the ground, as he had sworn to his wife Sarah that he would not get off from the camel. And Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, My daughter, give me a little water that I may drink, for I am fatigued from the journey. And Ishmael's wife answered and said to Abraham, We've neither water nor bread. And she continued sitting in the tent and did not notice Abraham, neither did she ask him who he was. But she was beating her children in the tent, and she was cursing them. And she also cursed her husband Ishmael and reproached him. And Abraham heard the words of Ishmael's wife to her children, and he was very angry and displeased. And Abraham called the woman to come out to him from the tent. And the woman came and stood opposite to Abraham, for Abraham was still mounted upon the camel. And Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, When thy husband Ishmael returneth home, say these words to him. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came hither to seek thee, and thus was his appearance and figure. I did not ask him who he was, and seeing thou wast not here, he spoke unto me and said, When Ishmael thy husband returneth, tell him, Thus did this man say, When thou comest home, put away this nail of the tent which thou hast placed here, and place another nail in its stead. And Abraham finished his instructions to the woman. He turned and went off on the camel homeward. And after that Ishmael came from the chase, he and his mother, and returned to the tent, and his wife spoke these words to him. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came to seek thee, and thus was his appearance and figure. I did not ask him who he was, and seeing thou wast not at home, he said to me, When thy husband cometh home, tell him, Thus saith the old man, Put away the nail of the tent which thou hast placed here, and place another nail in its stead. And Ishmael heard the words of his wife, and he knew that it was his father, and that his wife did not honor him. And Ishmael understood his father's words that he had spoken to his wife. And Ishmael hearkened to the voice of his father, and Ishmael cast off that woman, and she went away. And Ishmael afterward went to the land of Canaan, and he took another wife, and he brought her to his tent, to the place where he then dwelt. And at the end of 3 years, Abraham said, I will go again and see Ishmael my son, for I have not seen him for a long time. And he rode upon his camel and went to the wilderness, and he reached the tent of Ishmael about noon. And he asked after Ishmael, and his wife came out of the tent, and she said, He's not here, my lord, for he has gone to hunt in the fields and to feed the camels. And the woman said to Abraham, Turn in, my lord, to the tent, and eat a morsel of bread. Thy soul must be wearied on account of the journey. And Abraham said to her, I will not stop, for I am in haste to continue my journey, but give me a little water to drink, for I have thirst. And the woman hastened and ran to the tent, and brought out water and bread to Abraham, which she placed before him, and she urged him to eat. And he ate and drank, and his heart was comforted. And he blessed his son Ishmael. And he finished his meal, and he blessed the Lord. And he said to Ishmael's wife, When Ishmael cometh home, say these words to him. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came hither, and asked after thee, and thou wast not here. And I brought him out bread and water, and he ate and drank, and his heart was comforted. And he spoke these words to me: When Ishmael, my husband, cometh home, say unto him, The nail of the tent which thou hast is very good. Do not put it away from the tent. And Abraham finished commanding the woman, and he rode off to his home, to the land of the Philistines. And when Ishmael came to his tent, his wife went forth to meet him with joy and a cheerful heart. And she said to him, An old man came here from the land of the Philistines, and thus was his appearance. And he asked after thee, and thou wast not here. So I brought out bread and water, and he ate and drank, and his heart was comforted. And he spoke these words to me: When Ishmael thy husband cometh home, say to him, The nail of the tent which thou hast is very good. Do not put it away from the tent. And Ishmael knew that it was his father, and that his wife had honored him. And the Lord blessed Ishmael.
I love the cool stories like this in Jasher. We're going to read
Jasher, chapter 22.
to verse 3 right here.
And Ishmael then rose up and took his wife and his children and his cattle and all belonging to him. And he journeyed from there, and he went to his father in the land of the Philistines. And Abraham related to Ishmael his son the transaction with the first wife that Ishmael took, according to what she did. And Ishmael and his children dwelt with Abraham many days in that land. And Abraham dwelt in the land of the Philistines a long time.
All right, so Ishmael does make an appearance back as an adult with Abraham, setting the scene for what's to come later in this reading. All right, continuing in Genesis 21 now, verses 22 through the end of the chapter.
And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son. But according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing, neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it, but today.
Well, obviously, we're still on Abimelech. Could have obviously read this before the whole Isaac and Ishmael situation. So, little mess up on my part, but take it in.
And Abraham took sheep and oxen, and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they sware both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days.
Oh no, this is the right order. Excuse me. This is the right order. We're right in line over here with Jasher in verse 4. So let us read that story in the book of Jasher now. What is it? This is chapter 22. We're going to read verses 4 through 15. We're going to kind of jump around on this one, this long chapter. We're going to read 4 through 15, 33, 34, 40 through 55. And then we're going to get back into the book of Genesis.
And the days increased and reached 26 years. And after that, Abraham, with his servants and all belonging to him, went from the land of the Philistines and removed to a great distance. And they came near to Hebron, and they remained there. And the servants of Abraham dug wells of water, and Abraham and all belonging to him dwelt by the water. And the servants of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, heard the report that Abraham's servants had dug wells of water in the borders of the land. And they came and quarreled with the servants of Abraham, and they robbed them of the great well which they had dug. And Abimelech, king of the Philistines, heard of this affair. And he, with Phicol, the captain of his host, and 20 of his men, came to Abraham. And Abimelech spoke to Abraham concerning his servants. And Abraham rebuked Abimelech concerning the well of which his servants had robbed him. And Abimelech said to Abraham, As the Lord liveth, who created the whole earth, I did not hear of the act which my servants did unto thy servants until this day. And Abraham took 7 ewe lambs and gave them to Abimelech, saying, Take these, I pray thee, from my hands, that it may be a testimony for me that I dug this well. And Abimelech took the 7 ewe lambs which Abraham had given to him, for he had also given him cattle and herds in abundance. And Abimelech swore to Abraham concerning the well. Therefore he called that well Beersheba, for there they both swore concerning it. And they both made a covenant in Beersheba. And Abimelech rose up with Phicol, the captain of his host, and all his men, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham and all belonging to him dwelt in Beersheba, and he was in that land a long time. And Abraham planted a large grove in Beersheba, and he made to it 4 gates facing the 4 sides of the earth. And he planted a vineyard in it, so that if a traveler came to Abraham, he entered any gate which was in his road, and remained there, and ate and drank, and satisfied himself, and then departed. For the house of Abraham was always open to the sons of men that passed and repassed, who came daily to eat and drink in the house of Abraham. And any man who had hunger and came to Abraham's house, Abraham would give him bread that he might eat and drink and be satisfied. And anyone that came naked to his house, he would clothe with garments as he might choose, and give him silver and gold, and make known to him the Lord who had created him in the earth. Thus did Abraham all his life. And Abraham and his children and all belonging to him dwelt in Beersheba, and he pitched his tent as far as Hebron. And Abraham's brother Nahor and his father and all belonging to them dwelt in Haran, for they did not come with Abraham to the land of Canaan.
Man, how cool of a story is that? It starts off in verse, 11? Yes, 11 through 14, that Abraham planted a garden, a vineyard. He created gates so as people would come past, people would come in, eat, be filled with food, and then, of course, fill them with the word that brings forth eternal life. Ah, love it. What an example. And then we're going to jump down to 33 and 34 in the same chapter. And Terah died in that year. That is the 35th year of the birth of Isaac, son of Abraham. In the days of Terah were 205 years, and he was buried in Haran. And so we see this, and officially, Genesis 11:32, the summary And the days of Terah was 205, and Terah died in Haran. Okay. Happens much later, but it doesn't bring up his dad any time later. So that's why they give that note there in Genesis 11. And now we're going to continue and we're jumping to verse 40. I'm going to read verse 40 to 55 in chapter 22 of Jasher. And Isaac, the son of Abraham, was growing up in those days, and Abraham, his father, taught him the way of the Adon to know the Adon, and Hiah was with him. And when Isaac was 37 years old, Ishmael, his brother, was going about with him in the tent. So, like I said, read that story to set up that Ishmael is now back now that Isaac is an adult. Isaac is 37. Let's remember that because he's going to be 37 years old when we get to the point of the sacrifice, the infamous sacrifice of Isaac. He's not a little boy as like people would suggest he was. He was a fully grown man. And Ishmael boasted of himself to Isaac, saying, I was 13 years old when the Adon spoke to my father to circumcise us. And I did according to the word of the Adon, which he spoke to my father. And I gave my soul unto the Adon, and I did not transgress his words, which he commanded my father. And Isaac answered Ishmael, saying, why dost thou boast to me about this, about a little bit of thy flesh, circumcision, which thou didst take from thy body, concerning which the Adon commanded thee? He's saying it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. You circumcised yourself. As the Adon liveth, the Elohim of my father Abraham, if the Adon should say unto my father, take now thy son Isaac and bring him up an offering before me, I would not refrain, but I would joyfully accede to it. So we see that this was Isaac's idea. Watch out what you ask for. And the Adon heard the word that Isaac spoke to Ishmael, and it seemed good in the sight of the Adon. And he thought to try Abraham in this matter. And the day arrived when the sons of Elohim came and placed themselves before the Adon. So we're going to see a scene like unto the book of Job happening right now. So the sons of God came and placed themselves before the Adon, and Satan also came with the sons of Elohim before the Most High. And the Adon said unto Satan, which cometh thou? And Satan answered the Adon and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Adon said to Satan, what is thy word to me concerning all the children of the earth? And Satan answered the Adon and said, I have seen all the children of the earth who serve thee and remember thee when they acquire anything from thee. And when thou givest them the thing which they require from thee, they sit at their ease and forsake thee, and they remember thee no more. Has thou seen Abraham, the son of Terah, who at first had no children, and he served thee and erected altars to thee wherever he came, and he brought up offerings upon them, and he proclaimed thy name continually to all the children of the earth. And now that his son Isaac is born to him, he has forsaken thee. He has made a great feast for all the inhabitants of the land, and the Adon he has forgotten. For amidst all that he has done, he has brought thee no offering, neither burnt offering nor peace offering, neither ox, lamb, nor goat, of all that he killed on the day that his son was weaned. Even from the time of his son's birth till now, being 37 years, he built no altar before thee, nor brought any offering to thee. For he saw that thou didst give what he requested before thee, and he therefore forsook thee. And real quick, this is why we give thanks after we eat our food and not before it, as a reminder to be thankful after we have received what we have requested. Verse 54, and the Adon said to Satan, hast thou thus considered my servant Abraham? For there is none like him upon the earth, a perfect and an upright man before me, one that feareth Elohim, avoids evil. As I live, were I to say unto him, bring up Isaac thy son before me, he would not withhold him from me. Much more if I told him to bring up a burnt offering before me from his flock or herds. And Satan answered the Adon and said, speak then now unto Abraham as thou hast said, and thou wilt see whether he will not this day transgress and cast aside thy words. Man, a lot of good scripture talk right there. Sets the scene up for the great sacrifice scene, right? What a setup. All right. So let's set this scene up, going back to Genesis chapter 22. Yes, right. Isaac stood on business, right? He said he would do it, and he did. Now let's read on it.
Genesis 22. And it came to pass, after these things, that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the ass.
We will see in the book of Jasher, those young men, there's 2 young men, and that's Eleazar and Ishmael, which is why I was saying Ishmael's back in the picture now that they're adults. Obviously, the canon doesn't give these informations because the book of Jasher does.
And I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand, and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, my father? And he said, here am I, my son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood. But where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together.
Mashiach foreshadowing, indeed.
And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me.
Thy only son. We know that this isn't his only son, but it is his only promised son, because it's obviously a foreshadowing of Messiah.
And Abraham lifted up his eyes, and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went.
Messiah had a thicket's crown
and took the ram, and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up, and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba.
All right. So the book of Jasher, y'all, buckle up. This scene gets me every time. So much more detail in the book of Jasher. So I'm going to let the audio reader play it out. Here.
Till now, I live.
All right, here we are, reading the entirety of Jasher 23. This is by far one of my favorite chapters in all of Scripture.
Jasher, chapter 23. At that time, the word of the Lord came to Abraham, and he said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said to him, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which shall be shown to thee. For there wilt thou see a cloud and the glory of the Lord. And Abraham said within himself, How shall I separate my son Isaac from Sarah his mother, in order to bring him up for a burnt offering before the Lord? And Abraham came into the tent, and he sat before Sarah his wife, and he spoke these words to her. My son Isaac has grown up, and he has not for some time studied the service of his God. Now tomorrow I will go and bring him to Shem. And Abraham came into the tent, and he sat before Sarah his wife, and he spoke these words to her. My son Isaac has grown up, and he has not for some time studied the service of his God. Now tomorrow I will go and bring him to Shem and Eber his son, and there he will learn the ways of the Lord, for they will teach him to know the Lord, as well as to know that when he prayeth continually before the Lord, he will answer him. Therefore there he will know the way of serving the Lord his God.
And just to say this, to clear it up, yes, obviously this could be a little lie, but not necessarily, because this is exactly what ends up happening. Abraham does take Isaac to Shem and Eber after the sacrifice, just clearing that up there.
And Sarah said, Thou hast spoken well. Go, my lord, and do unto him as thou hast said. But remove him not at a great distance from me, neither let him remain there too long, for my soul is bound within his soul. And Abraham said unto Sarah, My daughter, let us pray to the Lord our God, that he may do good with us. And Sarah took her son Isaac, and he abode all that night with her. And she kissed and embraced him, and gave him instructions till morning. And she said to him, O my son, how can my soul separate itself from thee? And she still kissed and embraced him, and she gave Abraham instructions concerning him. And Sarah said to Abraham, O my lord, I pray thee take heed of thy son, and place thine eyes over him. For I have no other son nor daughter but him. O forsake him not. If he be hungry, give him bread, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. Do not let him go on foot, neither let him sit in the sun. Neither let him go by himself on the road, neither force him from whatever he may desire, but do unto him as he may say to thee. And Sarah wept bitterly the whole night on account of Isaac. And she gave him instructions till morning. And in the morning, Sarah selected a very fine and beautiful garment from those garments which she had in the house that Abimelech had given to her. And she dressed Isaac her son therewith. And she put a turban upon his head, and she enclosed a precious stone in the top of the turban. And she gave them provision for the road, and they went forth. And Isaac went with his father Abraham, and some of their servants accompanied them to see them off the road. And Sarah went out with them, and she accompanied them upon the road to see them off. And they said to her, Return to the tent. And when Sarah heard the words of her son Isaac, she wept bitterly. And Abraham her husband wept with her, and their son wept with them a great weeping. Also those who went with them wept greatly. And Sarah caught hold of her son Isaac, and she held him in her arms, and she embraced him and continued to weep with him. And Sarah said, Who knoweth if after this day I will ever see thee again? And they still wept together, Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, and all those that accompanied them on the road wept with them. And Sarah afterward turned away from her son, weeping bitterly. And all her menservants and maidservants returned with her to the tent. And Abraham went with Isaac his son to bring him up as an offering before the Lord, as he had commanded him. And Abraham took 2 of his young men with him, Ishmael, the son of Hagar, and Eliezer his servant. And they went together with them. And whilst they were walking in the road, the young men spoke these words to themselves. And Ishmael said to Eliezer, Now my father is going with Isaac to bring him up for a burnt offering to the Lord, as he commanded him. Now, when he returneth, he will give unto me all that he possesses, to inherit after him, for I am his firstborn. And Eliezer answered Ishmael and said, Surely Abraham did cast thee away with thy mother, and swear that thou shouldst not inherit anything of all he possesses. And to whom would he give all that he has with all his treasures, but unto me, his servant, who has been faithful in his house, who has served him night and day, and has done all that he desired me? To me will he bequeath at his death all that he possesses. And whilst Abraham was proceeding with his son Isaac along the road, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the figure of a very aged man, humble and of a contrite spirit. And he approached Abraham and said to him, Art thou silly or brutish, that thou goest to do this thing this day to thine only son? For God gave thee a son in thy latter days, in thy old age. And wilt thou go and slaughter him this day, because he committed no violence? And wilt thou cause the soul of thine only son to perish from the earth? Dost thou not know and understand that this thing cannot be from the Lord? For the Lord cannot do unto man such evil upon the earth, to say to him, Go slaughter thy child. And Abraham heard this, and knew that it was the word of Satan, who endeavored to draw him aside from the way of the Lord. But Abraham would not hearken to the voice of Satan. And Abraham rebuked him, so that he went away. And Satan returned and came to Isaac. And he appeared unto Isaac in the figure of a young man, comely and well favored. And he approached Isaac and said unto him, Dost thou not know and understand that thy old silly father bringeth thee to the slaughter this day for naught? Now therefore, my son, do not listen, nor attend to him, for he is a silly old man. And let not thy precious soul and beautiful figure be lost from the earth. And Isaac heard this, and said unto Abraham, Hast thou heard, my father, that which this man has spoken? Even thus has he spoken. And Abraham answered his son Isaac, and said to him, Take heed of him, and do not listen to his words, nor attend to him. For he is Satan, endeavoring to draw us aside this day from the commands of God. And Abraham still rebuked Satan. And Satan went from them. And seeing he could not prevail over them, he hid himself from them. And he went and passed before them in the road, and he transformed himself into a large brook of water in the road. And Abraham and Isaac and his 2 young men reached that place, and they saw a brook, large and powerful as the mighty waters. And they entered the brook and passed through it. And the waters at first reached their legs. And they went deeper in the brook, and the water reached up to their necks. And they were all terrified on account of the water. And whilst they were going over the brook, Abraham recognized that place. And he knew that there was no water there before. And Abraham said to his son Isaac, I know this place in which there was no brook nor water. Now therefore it is this Satan who does all this to us, to draw us aside this day from the commands of God. And Abraham rebuked him and said unto him, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan. Begone from us, for we go by the commands of God.
And for those in the know of the marine kingdom, is it any coincidence that he turned into a brook of water?
And Satan was terrified at the voice of Abraham, and he went away from them, and the place again became dry land, as it was at first. And Abraham went with Isaac toward the place that God had told him. And on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place at a distance which God had told him of. And a pillar of fire appeared to him that reached from the earth to heaven, and a cloud of glory upon the mountain, and the glory of the Lord was seen in the cloud. And Abraham said to Isaac, My son, dost thou see in that mountain which we perceive at a distance that which I see upon it? And Isaac answered and said unto his father, I see, and lo, a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of the Lord is seen upon the cloud. And Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Lord for a burnt offering. And Abraham said unto Eliezer and unto Ishmael his son, Do you also see that which we see upon the mountain which is at a distance? And they answered and said, We see nothing more than like the other mountains of the earth. And Abraham knew that they were not accepted before the Lord to go with them. And Abraham said to them, Abide ye here with the ass, whilst I and Isaac my son will go to yonder mount and worship there before the Lord, and then return to you.
And we can also add verse 45, and Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Adon for a burnt offering. And if that's the case, Isaac at this point in time had to be a perfect sacrifice. That is the golden rule for any burnt offerings to our Creator, is that you have to be a perfect sacrifice. So everything's in line for this great day. And we see that Eleazar and Ishmael did not see the cloud. They were not meant to be there.
And Eliezer and Ishmael remained in that place, as Abraham had commanded. And Abraham took wood for a burnt offering, and placed it upon his son Isaac. And he took the fire and the knife, and they both went to that place. And when they were going along, Isaac said to his father, Behold, I see here the fire and the wood, and where then is the lamb that is to be the burnt offering before the Lord? And Abraham answered his son Isaac, saying, The Lord has made choice of thee, my son, to be a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb.
There it is, a perfect burnt offering. Abraham and Isaac were walking in perfection. Very, very, very righteous individuals.
And Isaac said unto his father, I will do all that the Lord spoke to thee with joy and cheerfulness of heart. Then Abraham again said to Isaac his son, Is there in thy heart any thought or counsel concerning this which is not proper? Tell me, my son, I pray thee. O my son, conceal it not from me. And Isaac answered his father Abraham and said unto him, O my father, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is nothing in my heart to cause me to deviate, either to the right or to the left, from the word that he has spoken to thee. Neither limb nor muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there in my heart any thought or evil concerning this. But I am of joyful and cheerful heart in this matter. And I say, Blessed is the Lord, who has this day chosen me to be a burnt offering before him. And Abraham greatly rejoiced at the words of Isaac. And they went on and came together to that place that the Lord had spoken of. And Abraham approached to build the altar in that place. And Abraham was weeping, and Isaac took stones and mortar till they had finished building the altar. And Abraham took the wood and placed it in order upon the altar which he had built. And he took his son Isaac and bound him in order to place him upon the wood which was upon the altar, to slay him for a burnt offering before the Lord. And Isaac said to his father, Bind me securely, and then place me upon the altar, lest I should turn and move and break loose from the force of the knife upon my flesh, and therefore profane the burnt offering. And Abraham did so.
And let's remember, this is a 37-year-old man. That's why he's very coherent and responsible as well for this whole sacrifice. This is not just Abraham being tested, obviously Isaac as well.
And Isaac still said to his father, O my father, when thou shalt have slain me and burnt me for an offering, take with thee that which shall remain of my ashes to bring to Sarah my mother, and say to her, This is the sweet-smelling savor of Isaac. But do not tell her this if she should sit near a well or upon any high place, lest she should cast her soul after me and die. And Abraham heard the words of Isaac, and he lifted up his voice and wept when Isaac spake these words. And Abraham's tears gushed down upon Isaac his son. And Isaac wept bitterly. And he said to his father, Hasten thou, O my father, and do with me the will of the Lord our God, as he has commanded thee. And the hearts of Abraham and Isaac rejoiced at this thing which the Lord had commanded them. But the eye wept bitterly, whilst the heart rejoiced. And Abraham bound his son Isaac, and placed him on the altar upon the wood. And Isaac stretched forth his neck upon the altar before his father. And Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay his son as a burnt offering before the Lord. At that time, angels of mercy came before the Lord and spake to him concerning Isaac, saying, O Lord, thou art a merciful and compassionate king over all that thou hast created in heaven and in earth, and thou supportest them all. Give, therefore, ransom and redemption instead of thy servant Isaac, and pity and have compassion upon Abraham and Isaac his son, who are this day performing thy commands.
In reading the book of Enoch, the fallen angels request Enoch to supplicate to the Most High, a request to be forgiven. And the Most High says, man should not speak on the behalf, or can't think of the exact word, but be a support on the behalf of man. Man should be on the support of the behalf of the angels. Angels should be on the support of the behalf of man. And we're seeing this right now in the book of Jasher, how the angels do protect and care for us, and is literally pleading to the Most High, even though the Most High already had this in his plan. But it just goes to show that they don't know everything that the Most High knows, and that they love us and protect us as their own as well.
Hast thou seen, O Lord, how Isaac the son of Abraham thy servant is bound down to the slaughter like an animal? Now therefore let thy pity be roused for them, O Lord. At that time the Lord appeared unto Abraham, and called to him from heaven, and said unto him, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God in performing this act, and in not withholding thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a ram was caught in a thicket by his horns. That was the ram which the Lord had created in the earth in the day that he made earth and heaven. For the Lord had prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac. And this ram was advancing to Abraham when Satan caught hold of him and entangled his horns in the thicket, that he might not advance to Abraham, in order that Abraham might slay his son. And Abraham, seeing the ram advancing to him, and Satan withholding him, fetched him and brought him before the altar. And he loosened his son Isaac from his binding, and he put the ram in his stead. And Abraham killed the ram upon the altar, and brought it up as an offering in the place of his son Isaac. And Abraham sprinkled some of the blood of the ram upon the altar, and he exclaimed and said, This is in the place of my son, and may this be considered this day as the blood of my son before the Lord. And all that Abraham did on this occasion by the altar, he would exclaim and say, This is in the room of my son, and may it this day be considered before the Lord in the place of my son. And Abraham finished the whole of the service by the altar. And the service was accepted before the Lord, and was accounted as if it had been Isaac. And the Lord blessed Abraham and his seed on that day.
Oh man, but yes, the word was intercede for man, and there's just so much we get from this chapter, this story. Oh, by far one of my favorite stories. And we see angels interceding for man as written throughout scripture. We see the details in the story of Isaac being a perfect sacrifice, being chosen, him standing on business, the details behind the sacrifice. Oh my goodness. It is all so, oh, it just gives me goosebumps. I love it. I love it. Absolutely. What a great read. And in doing all of this, James 2:21 through 23, was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? Seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, Abraham believed Elohim, it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called a friend of Elohim. Tudah, Abraham, for your righteous deeds, and setting an example for your children, and all of us reading till this day. All right. So now we get to the back end of this story, which is the sadder part, because this is the time where Sarah passes away. Very quick 2 chapters in the book of Genesis, but we'll get more of the details in the book of Jasher. So we're going to read verse 1 and 2.
Genesis 23. And Sarah was 127 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her.
All right, so we're going to see how she did get in Hebron and how she died in the book of Jasher. Now we're just continuing in verse 76 in the same chapter of 23. Let's continue.
And Satan went to Sarah, and he appeared to her in the figure of an old man, very humble and meek. And Abraham was yet engaged in the burnt offering before the Lord. And he said unto her, Dost thou not know all the work that Abraham has made with thine only son this day? For he took Isaac and built an altar and killed him, and brought him up as a sacrifice upon the altar. And Isaac cried and wept before his father, but he looked not at him, neither did he have compassion over him. And Satan repeated these words, and he went away from her. And Sarah heard all the words of Satan, and she imagined him to be an old man from amongst the sons of men who had been with her son, and had come and told her these things. And Sarah lifted up her voice and wept, and cried out bitterly on account of her son. And she threw herself on the ground, and she cast dust upon her head, and she said, O my son Isaac, my son, oh, that I had this day died instead of thee. And she still continued to weep, and said, It grieves me for thee, after that I have reared thee, and have brought thee up. Now my joy is turned into mourning over thee. I, that had a longing for thee, and cried and prayed to God till I bare thee at 90 years old. And now hast thou served this day for the knife and the fire, to be made an offering. But I console myself with thee, my son, in its being the word of the Lord. For thou didst perform the command of thy God. For who can transgress the word of our God, in whose hands is the soul of every living creature? Thou art just, O Lord our God, for all thy works are good and righteous. For I also am rejoiced with thy word which thou didst command. And whilst mine eye weepeth bitterly, my heart rejoiceth.
So we see that she doesn't question the Most High if that was the Most High's will, but Sarah does fail the test that she listened and allowed the devil to manipulate her mind.
And Sarah laid her head upon the bosom of one of her handmaids, and she became still as stone. And Sarah laid her head upon the bosom of one of her handmaids, and she became as still as a stone. She afterward rose up and went about making inquiries till she came to Hebron. And she inquired of all those whom she met walking in the road, and no one could tell her what had happened to her son. And she came with her maidservants and menservants to Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron. And she asked concerning her son. And she remained there while she sent some of her servants to seek where Abraham had gone with Isaac. They went to seek him in the house of Shem and Eber, but they could not find him. And they sought throughout the land, and he was not there. And behold, Satan came to Sarah in the shape of an old man. And he came and stood before her, and he said unto her, I spoke falsely unto thee, for Abraham did not kill his son, and he's not dead. And when she heard the word, her joy was so exceedingly violent on account of her son that her soul went out through joy. She died and was gathered to her people. And when Abraham had finished his service, he returned with his son Isaac. And when Abraham had finished his service, he returned with his son Isaac to his young men. And they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and they came home. And Abraham sought for Sarah and could not find her. He made inquiries concerning her, and they said unto him, She went as far as Hebron to seek you both where you had gone, for thus was she informed. And Abraham and Isaac went to her to Hebron. And when they found that she was dead, they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly over her. And Isaac fell upon his mother's face and wept over her. And he said, O my mother, how hast thou left me? And where hast thou gone? Oh, how hast thou left me? And Abraham and Isaac wept greatly. And all their servants wept with them on account of Sarah. And they mourned over her a great and heavy mourning.
Wow. So much details, right? All right. Genesis 23, we're going to read verse 3 through 20 now.
And Abraham stood up from before his dead, and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger, and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my lord. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up, and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and entreat for me to Ephron the son of Zoar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city, saying, Nay, my lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein I give it thee. In the presence of the sons of my people give I it thee. Bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land. And he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, My lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver, which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money, with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field, and the cave that is therein, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth.
All right. Jasher 24. Let's continue.
Jasher chapter 24. And the life of Sarah was 127 years, and Sarah died. And Abraham rose up from before his dead to seek a burial place to bury his wife Sarah. And he went and spoke to the children of Heth, the inhabitants of the land, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you in your land. Give me a possession of a burial place in your land, that I may bury my dead from before me. And the children of Heth said unto Abraham, Behold, the land is before thee. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead, for no man shall withhold thee from burying thy dead. And Abraham said unto them, If you are agreeable to this, go and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zochar, requesting that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which is in the end of his field, and I will purchase it of him for whatever he desire for it. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and they went and called for him, and he came before Abraham. And Ephron said unto Abraham, Behold, all thou requirest thy servant will do. And Abraham said, No, but I will buy the cave and the field which thou hast for value, in order that it may be for a possession of a burial place forever. And Ephron answered and said, Behold, the field and the cave are before thee. Give whatever thou desirest. And Abraham said, Only at full value will I buy it from thy hand, and from the hands of those who go in at the gate of thy city, and from the hand of thy seed forever. And Ephron and all his brethren heard this. And Abraham weighed to Ephron 400 shekels of silver in the hands of Ephron, and in the hands of all his brethren. And Abraham wrote this transaction. And he wrote and testified it with 4 witnesses. And these are the names of the witnesses: Amichel, the son of Abishna the Hittite; Adikoram, the son of Ashunak the Hivite; Abdon, the son of Achiram the Gomerite; Bactil, the son of Abadish the Zionite. And Abraham took the book of the purchase and placed it in his treasures. And these are the words that Abraham wrote in the book, namely, that the cave and the field Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite, and from his seed, and from those that go out of his city, and from their seed forever, are to be a purchase to Abraham and to his seed, and to those that go forth from his loins, for a possession of a burial place forever. And he put a signet to it, and testified it with witnesses. And the field and the cave that was in it, and all that place, were made sure unto Abraham and unto his seed after him from the children of Heth. Behold, it is before Mamre in Hebron, which is in the land of Canaan. And after this Abraham buried his wife Sarah there. And that place and all its boundary became to Abraham and unto his seed for a possession of a burial place. And Abraham buried Sarah with pomp, as observed at the interment of kings. And she was buried in very fine and beautiful garments. And at her bier was Shem, his sons Eber and Abimelech, together with Anar, Ashcol, and Mamre, and all the grandees of the land followed her bier. And the days of Sarah were 127 years, and she died. And Abraham made a great and heavy mourning, and he performed the rites of mourning for 7 days. And all the inhabitants of the land comforted Abraham and Isaac his son on account of Sarah. And when the days of their mourning passed by, Abraham sent away his son, and he went to the house of Shem and Eber to learn the ways of the Lord and his instructions.
There's that connection. So he did send Isaac to the school of prophets of Shem and Eber.
And Abraham remained there 3 years. At that time, Abraham rose up with all his servants, and they went and returned homeward to Beersheba. And Abraham and all his servants remained in Beersheba.
All right, we're going to pause right there, and we're going to head back to Genesis. Let's continue the story. We're going to read 1 through 14, Genesis 24.
Genesis 24. And Abraham was old, and well stricken in age. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house, that ruled over all that he had, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but thou shalt go unto my country, and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. And the servant said unto him, Peradventure the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from whence thou camest? And Abraham said unto him, Beware thou that thou bring not my son thither again. The Lord God of heaven, which took me from my father's house, and from the land of my kindred, and which spake unto me, and that sware unto me, saying, Unto thy seed will I give this land, he shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. And if the woman will not be willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this my oath. Only bring not my son thither again. And the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and sware to him concerning that matter. And the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master, and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand. And he arose, and went to Mesopotamia, unto the city of Nahor. And he made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water, at the time of the evening, even the time that women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass, that the damsel to whom I shall say, Let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink. And she shall say, Drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac, and thereby shall I know that thou hast shown kindness unto my master.
All right. Commandment to Eleazar to retrieve Rebekah for Isaac. Jump in to verse 27 in chapter 24 of Jasher now. And Nahor, the son of Terah, brother to Abraham, died in those days, in the 40th year of the life of Isaac. All the days of Nahor were 172 years, and he died and was buried in Haran. And when Abraham heard that his brother was dead. So I started off in verse 27 because just to show you what triggered Abraham to send Eleazar to fetch a wife for his son. And when Abraham heard that his brother was dead, he grieved sadly, and he mourned over his brother many days. And Abraham called for Eleazar, his head servant, to give him orders concerning his house. And he came and stood before him. And Abraham said to him, Behold, I am old, and I do not know the day of my death, for I am advanced in days. Now, therefore, rise up, go forth, and do not take a wife from my son, from this place and from this land, from the daughters of the Canaanites, amongst whom we dwell. It's funny thinking that, things obviously they lived longer back then. But man, was Isaac not looking for a wife at 40 years old? Right? Just throwing it out there. But go to my land and to my birthplace, and take from thence a wife for my son in the Adon Elohim of heaven and earth, who took me from my father's house and brought me to this place, and said unto me, To thy seed will I give this land for an inheritance forever. He will send his angel before thee and prosper thy way, that thou mayest obtain a wife for my son from my family and from my father's house. And the servant answered his master Abraham and said, Behold, I go to thy birthplace and to thy father's house, and take a wife for thy son from there. But if the woman be not willing to follow me to this land, shall I take thy son back to the land of thy birthplace? And Abraham said unto him, Take heed that thou bring not my son hither again, for the Adon before whom I have walked, he will send his angel before thee and prosper thy way. And Eleazar did as Abraham ordered him. Eleazar swore unto Abraham, his master, upon this matter. And Eleazar rose up and took 10 camels of the camels of his master, and 10 men from his master's servants with him. And they rose up and went to Haran, to the city of Abraham and Nahor, in order to fetch a wife for Isaac the son of Abraham. And while if they were gone, Abraham sent to the house of Shem and Eber, and they brought from thence his son Isaac. So Isaac is returning while his wife is coming. And now, just summarizing it because we know the story of Rebecca, and this isn't the story of Isaac. This is the story of Abraham. So now we're just summarizing all of it to get to the point of the matter. So I'm going to read verses 27 through 34. Excuse me. We are going to Genesis 25 and just summarizing the matter. Eleazar does exactly what Abraham has commanded him, and Rebecca arrives and goes into the tent and marries Isaac. So now we're going to Genesis 25, which we are now coming to the end of the story of Abraham, where his time as a man on this earth comes to an end. So we're going to read Genesis 25.
Genesis 25. Then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. And Jokshan begat Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashrim, and Letashim, and Leumim, and the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher, and Hanok, and Abida, and Eldaah. All these were the children of Keturah.
And we're going to see, as I mentioned earlier, Keturah is Hagar. Another time where the name has changed, but it's the same person.
And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts, and sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 160 years. Then Abraham gave up the ghost, and died in a good old age, an old man, and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well, Lahai Roi.
All right, so Abraham was 175 years old, if you are not used to reading this weird language here. 103 score and 15. So 3 score, that is 60. So 160 plus 15, 175. And yes, let's go and get more details, such as Hagar being the wife that he pretty much remarries after the death of Sarah, which we are going to read Jasher 25. I'm going to read 1 through 12. And it was at that time that Abraham again took a wife in his old age, and her name was Keturah, from the land of Canaan. And she bare unto him what we just read, her 6 sons. And yeah, I'm not going to reread all the names. It's the same exact genealogy we just got done reading, just showing you the comparison in the book of Jasher 25. But here we go. All these are the families of the children of Keturah, the Canaanitish woman, which she bare unto Abraham the Hebrew. And Abraham sent all these away, and he gave them gifts, and they went away from his son Isaac to dwell wherever they should find a place. And all these went to the mountain at the east, and they built themselves 6 cities in which they dwelt unto this day. But the children of Sheba and Dedan, children of Jokshan, with their children, did not dwell with their brother in their cities, and they journeyed and encamped in the countries and wilderness unto this day. And the children of Median, the son of Abraham. Median is the descendant of Abraham, if you did not know. Went to the east of the land of Cush, and they were found a large valley in the eastern country, and they remained there and built a city, and they dwelt therein. That is the land of Midian unto this day. And Midian dwelt in the city which he built, he and his 5 sons, and all belonging to him. And these are the names of the sons of Midian. Boom. And yeah, we'll stop there. And I just wanted to make some connections with you now, saying that the Median is the son of Abraham. And I think it's in the Targums. I'm about to open up these Targums real quick. Let me see here. Targums 25. I think that's where it tells us. Here we go. Yes. Y'all seeing what I'm seeing, right? Yeah. Abraham added and took a wife. Her name was Keturah. She is Hagar. Let me add that. I forgot to add that in my notes there. It's in the Targums that give us that understanding. All right. And now want to connect that the Midianites are of the seed of Abraham. So when we jump to the story of the Exodus and Moses, let me go to Jasher 67. Verse 24. And the king sent and called his 2 counselors, Reuel, which is another person that had 2 names. This is Moses' stepfather, Jethro, the Midianite, and Job, the Uznite. And they came and sat before the king. So Jethro is a descendant of Abraham through Hagar or Keturah. And then once again, one more precept with the Midianites. Verse 13 in chapter 76. So Moses went to Midian, for he was afraid to return to Egypt on the account of Moses. And he went and sat at a well of the water of Midian. And the 7 daughters of Uriel, the Midianite, went out to feed their father's flock. So these are both the sons of Abraham, just from one from Isaac and one from the son of Sarah and Isaac, and one from the son of Hagar through not Ishmael, Midian. All right, and now to officially close off the story of Abraham, we finish in Jasher 26, verses 18 through 39. And Isaac and the children of his household dwelt with his father Abraham in the land of Canaan, as Elohim had commanded them. And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, went with his children and all belonging to them, and they returned there to the land of Havilah, and they dwelt there. And all the children of Abraham's concubines went to dwell in the land of the east, for Abraham had sent them away from his son and had given them presents, and they went away. And Abraham gave all that he had to his son Isaac, and he also gave him all his treasures. And he commanded him, saying, Dost thou not know and understand the Adon is Elohim in heaven and in earth, and there is no other beside him. And it was he who took me from my father's house and from my birthplace, and gave me all the delights upon earth, who delivered me from the counsel of the wicked, for in him did I trust. And he brought me to this place, and he delivered me from Ur-Kasdim, and he said unto me, To thy seed will I give all these lands, and they shall inherit them when they keep my commandments, my statutes, and my judgments that I commanded thee, in which I shall command them. Now, therefore, my son, hearken to my voice and keep the commandments. I love it. Very important. Of the Adon, thy Elohim, which I command thee. Do not turn from the right way, either to the right or to the left, in order that it may be well with thee and thy children after thee forever. And remember the wonderful works of the Adon in his kindness that he has shown towards us, in having delivered us from the hands of our enemies. And the Adon, our Elohim, caused them to fall into our hands. And now, therefore, keep all that I have commanded thee, and turn not away from the commandments of thy Elohim, and serve none beside me, in order that it may be well with thee and thy seed after me. And teach thou thy children and thy seed the instructions of the Adon in his commandments, and teach them the upright way in which they should go, in order that it may be well with them forever. And Isaac answered his father and said to him, That which my Adon had commanded, that I will do, and I will not depart from the commands of the Adon my Elohim. I will keep all that he commanded me. And Abraham blessed his son Isaac and also his children. And Abraham taught Jacob the instruction of the Adon in his ways. So yes, Esau and Jacob was born before the death of Abraham. And it was at that time that Abraham died in the 15th year of the life of Jacob and Esau, the sons of Isaac. And all the days of Abraham were 175 years. And he died and was gathered to his people in a good old age, old and satisfied with days. And Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him. And when the inhabitants of Canaan heard that Abraham was dead, they all came with their kings and princes and all their men to bury Abraham. And all the inhabitants of the land of Haran, and all the families of the house of Abraham, and all the princes and grandees, and the sons of Abraham by the concubines, all came when they heard Abraham's death, and they acquitted Abraham's kindness and comforted Isaac his son, and they buried Abraham in the cave which he brought from Ephron the Hittite, and his children for the possession of a burial place. And all the inhabitants of Canaan and all those who had known Abraham wept for Abraham a whole year, and men and women mourned over him. And all the little children and all the inhabitants of the land wept on the account of Abraham, for Abraham had been good to them all, and because he had been upright with Elohim and men. And there arose not a man who feared Elohim like unto Abraham, for he had feared his Elohim from his youth, and had served the Adon, and had gone in all his ways during his life from his childhood to the day of his death. And the Adon was with him and delivered him from the counsel of Nimrod and his people. And when he made war with the four kings of Elam, he conquered them. And he brought all the children of the earth to the service of Elohim. and he taught them in the ways of the Adon and caused them to know the Adon. And he formed a grove and planted a vineyard therein, and he had always prepared his tent, meat and drink to those that had passed through the land, that they might satisfy themselves in his house. And the Adon Elohim delivered the whole earth on account of Abraham. And it was after the death of Abraham that Elohim blessed his son Isaac and his children. And the Adon was with Isaac as he had been with his father Abraham. For Isaac kept all the commandments of Hayah as Abraham, his father, had commanded him. He did not turn to the right or to the left from the right path which his father had commanded him. And in closing, a few precepts. Acts 3:25. Ye are the children of the prophets and of the covenant which Elohim made our fathers, saying unto Abraham, and in thy seed shall all kindreds of the earth be blessed. And through the obedience of Abraham, the promise was made through his seed that all the kindreds of the earth will be blessed. And that seed is to Mashiach. Galatians 3:16. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He says, not into seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Mashiach. And we see that our Mashiach is the seed of Abraham. Psalms 105. For he remembered his holy promise in Abraham his servant, and he brought forth his people with joy, and his chosen with gladness, and gave them the lands of the heathen, and they inherited the labor of the people, that they might observe his statutes and keep his laws, as Abraham has told his descendants to do. Praise ye Hayah. And in Matthew 8:11, and I say unto you that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. Tudah Yasharallah for joining me in the story of Abraham. Compliments from the baseline reading from Genesis in the book of Jasher. Tudah and shalom, and thank y'all for joining me once again.